11 o'clock on your Wednesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you, navigating you through the week. Of course, we'll have plenty to talk about as the week goes along about the upcoming national championship game on Monday. As guys, the realization was setting in with me earlier on this morning, talking with Jack about the national championship and the divisional playoff games this weekend. This is the last really full weekend of football we get. Yeah, you still get conference championships, still got the Super Bowl, but as far as a Saturday through Monday like we're going to get this weekend, last one until really August.
I don't want to talk about it, guys.
I know it's sad.
It is very bittersweet. You love these final games because they have so much at stake. And NFL wise, I'm really not a regular season watcher.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a little bit of the Panthers. If there's a big game, I'll watch it. The quality of football, though, I feel like you get in the playoffs, completely different than week to week.
Sure.
And the quality of game plan you get where nothing is going to be held back is completely different. And let's be honest, there's a little bit of an unspoken, you have certain guys that go 100% every single second they're on the field. Pat DeMarco actually told a great story with us about having to meet in the hole against Thomas Davis.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
what a challenge.
He was so they met each other off the field years later, and they both just kind of looked at each other, and they're just like, man, you wouldn't back down. And the other one's like, well, you wouldn't back down. So there is, I think, a little bit of an unspoken during the regular season, all right, we're going to try to not get everybody hurt, basically. But then the gloves come off a little bit in playoff time. You see guys take it to maybe that next level. And so you enjoy these games, but also it is bittersweet. We only got one final college football game left. We've got it. Now, it's going to be a great weekend of NFL football, I think, and then the conference championship weekend is always great. But even the Super Bowl itself, to me, is just kind of bittersweet.
Chris, how are you adapting to the reality of football coming to an end?
We're not doing well here either. I'm doing badly. I will increase my volume of NFL watching. You're right, Wes. I mean, man, I would honestly like to watch more NFL. There's a couple of things. Number one, the Panthers have not exactly made it appointment viewing for the team that I've followed since they came into the league in '95. There were some great moments, early and, in that Cam Newton era when, they made the Super Bowl. Before that, the game I'm not going to speak of, the Patriots game, parentheses, when they made the Super Bowl. Back then, Jake Delhomme, Moose Muhammad, Steve Smith. There have been some great moments, not as many lately, but, I do like watching the NFL. It's actually what I grew up on, watching the NFL even before I got into college football. But we are just during the season, Sunday, a lot of times, of course, most weeks, Carolina has just played a football game the day before. There's a lot to unpack from that. There's recruiting stuff, sometimes traveling from an away game. So I will be able to increase the NFL watching here during the playoffs. But yeah, college football going away. So that's why we always say, right, you gotta savor these opportunities. If you cover, you follow a college football team, you get 12 games guaranteed, and there's normally ups and downs throughout the year, but you got to enjoy it. And I'll tell you, there's something I've been reflecting on too, just semi-related, not having anything to do with the fact that we're losing football here soon, but just looking at the teams that were in the playoff and still are in the playoff with Notre Dame and Ohio State. This is why we follow recruiting and talent acquisition, whether it's high school recruiting, now that the portal NIL is in full swing. That's why we follow these things so much, because at the end of the day, it's a talent acquisition game, and I've had more than one conversation over the last couple weeks, certainly since the playoffs started, of, hey, look at the teams that are in the playoff. They are, for the most part, teams that have done extremely well on the talent acquisition front. And you don't make the playoff because on paper you had a bunch of top 10 classes, a bunch of top 5 ranked classes. You can definitely point to examples of, hey, this team, had a couple top 5 classes over the past few years. Where are they in the playoff? Yes, there are those examples. But to win, and to win big, to win a championship, to have an opportunity, you've got to have talent on your roster. The teams that stack the most talent win. And, that's how South Carolina went. All credit to the coaching staff and the players, et cetera. But that's how South Carolina went to the doorstep of the playoff this year. How did they do it? Well, the offseason, they retained their top talent, and they brought in a bunch of talent. And if you look at Notre Dame, I went back this morning from the 2021 onward, they have been top 12 at worst in the recruiting rankings. And at best, they've had top 10, top 8 type classes. And guys, we all know, I don't even have to pull up Ohio State's recruiting rankings on On3. We all know year after year, they're up there, right? And then you look at Texas, you look at Oregon. No, they're not playing, but they've been in the mix. Georgia. It's a talent acquisition game, and that's why it's so fun to follow the portal, follow high school recruiting. You got to stack really, really good classes, because if you do that, you're going to put yourself in position, to go win something at the end of the year.
And I think it's an important point that you make, and I think this national championship game reinforces something that I think we all have known. And certainly when you look at Ohio State's roster, yes, you have Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, you have Caleb Downs on the defensive side of the ball that did come in via the transfer portal, but a bulk of what they have on that team, look at a guy like Jack Sawyer as a perfect example with his scoop and score against Texas, is a lot of homegrown talent, guys they did bring in from the high school ranks they developed to a certain point. And we look at teams across college football that try and flip their entire rosters with the transfer portal in the offseason. And again, there's nothing wrong with supplementing spots in areas of need, but it is still at the end of the day, like you guys said, about building those good recruiting classes and developing talent to get to the point where, yes, it's fine to go out there and get some areas that you need via the portal, but that's not your end-all be-all in terms of building teams that, again, are playing for national championships like these two this weekend.
Yeah, it's a balance. It will always be a balance, I think, and the teams that can sort of walk that line between going into the portal and being a place that portal guys want to come to versus, also not just relying so heavily on it, I think are the teams that are going to win. And, lo and behold, we do have parity in college football. We do have a bigger playoff, but here we are with two, what you would say are original blue bloods fighting it out for the national championship, which I do think in a lot of ways, like we love the underdogs. We love the underdog battle, but you do ultimately you don't want to see two underdogs in your national championship game. Most people at least want to see a David versus Goliath, if not two Goliaths fighting it out for the ultimate prize in college football. Even if they say that's not what they want,
sure.
Ultimately the big brands, more people are going to watch. And so you did get that, and I'm trying to find an old tweet, not that old, but from last week from Charles Power. And for those that don't know, he is one of the top recruiting guys at On3. And it was a breakdown of the number of big-time, like blue chippers that were in. I think this was from Texas versus Ohio State, and then Notre Dame versus Penn State. And they kind of had a breakdown of how highly recruited all the guys were on those two rosters or on those four rosters. And by Charles's count, and we lean on Charles a ton here, like if you go through and look at the industry rankings for Notre Dame, it's a little bit more skewed to kind of your four-star type guys. But on the On3 sort of isolated ranking that Charles is heavily involved in, there were several more true 5 stars on this Notre Dame roster. So Ohio State obviously has the best roster, I think, in college football. We finally saw that play out on the field. But by no means did Notre Dame put together a group of 3 stars and throw them on the field and just go compete with the best of the best. This is a highly, highly recruited roster. And then on top of it, they went into the transfer portal and got a guy who was really, really good at Duke and brings some different elements to, especially with the quarterback run game, to their offense.
Got to have great quarterback play, There are, I mean, if you go through and look at the teams that have won championships almost every year, there's great quarterback play. And the one I always bring up, and I don't mean it as a disrespect or anything, but remember when Bama won the national title with Jake Coker, yep. Right? Like that was one of the more recent examples where a team won a title without a quarterback who was, not extremely dynamic. And Jake Coker was a good player at Bama, right? But he was your program as freshmen. And if you have the opportunity, first of all, if they're talented, but then you can go develop them over the course of 3 or 4 years, by the time they're juniors, seniors, redshirt seniors, if you can sprinkle in some difference makers in the portal, if you're bringing in portal difference makers who are also experienced, Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight, being old, being experienced is a way you can win. And I think you look across Ohio State's Notre Dame's rosters, there's talent, there's really good quarterback play. Both teams are really sound defensively. They've got depth and they've got experience. Not every player on the team is, a senior, a fifth-year guy. Sure, they have some younger guys sprinkled in there, but very experienced team. You don't hear a ton of teams going to compete for titles where you say, that's a really young team. Typically, and this spans a lot of sports, most sports, if you're experienced, it's going to help you so much in these big game situations. But quarterback play, you're right, Wes. I mean, Notre Dame goes out. What's a missing piece for them? Quarterback. You go get one on the transfer market. That should make you feel good if you're a South Carolina fan, actually, because you've got a guy in Lenora Sellers who really, really got better throughout the course of the year and is a difference-making type guy. So can you go and continue to develop and build around him as well?
Yeah, and so both national championship teams transfer quarterbacks. 3 of the final 4 transfer quarterbacks.
Yep.
Kind of interesting. How many 4 and 5 stars do y'all think are on the Ohio State roster?
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 combined.
So if we go, you're kind of basing this, I assume, off the 85, well, just overall. I'm trying to think, to do the math equation, the 85 scholarships. I'm going to say, I always think about the blue chip ratio because On 3 has that. Maybe that's how you're pulling it, Wes. Out of 85 guys, former 4 and 5 stars, I'm going to go with 62.
Let's hit it on the other side, Tyler.
Okay. Say that for the other side. How many 4 and 5 stars does Ohio State
and
have?
for Notre Dame.
And for Notre Dame, ahead of Monday night's national championship game as the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, rolls along on your Wednesday here on the game.
All right, folks, let us tell you about our friends over at Krantz Cooling. Since 1983, that's 2Ks, KrantzCooling.com. You rely on your home's air conditioning and heating systems to keep your temperatures throughout your house comfortable year-round. To keep those systems in working order, you want a professional, reliable, full-service contractor. Krantz is serving homeowners just like you in the Columbia area by delivering quality workmanship, products, positive results, safety, uncompromising integrity, as well as any of the services you need for your HVAC systems. Of course, that includes air conditioner, heating, preventative maintenance, ductless AC, indoor air quality, or if you are a business owner as well, hit up our friends at Krantz for your commercial HVAC services. How do you do that? Phone number 803-672-3224. Again, that's 803-672-3224. Or head on over to KrantzCooling.com.
Well, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Reminder, men's basketball tonight in action as they take on Vanderbilt on the road. Pregame coverage starting at 5:30 for a 6 o'clock tip on the game here in Columbia, as well as 100.3 the game out in Myrtle Beach. We'll obviously talk about that game tomorrow and see if Coach Paris's crew can get their first SEC win of the season. But you've waited through the entire break. Wes is going to reveal just how many 4- and 5-star talents are on their respective rosters for the national championship on Monday.
All right, this is according to On3 Industry Rankings, which is a weighted average of the 4 major services. Final guesses, guys, for Ohio State?
I'll bump mine up to 48. How about that?
Why'd you change?
Because, I don't know. I thought about it. They recruited at a high level every single year, so I'll go 48.
Chris, what was yours?
I think I said 62.
We'll see. When you go that high, you remove a little bit of the impact from when I say 55 4- or 5-star guys on the Ohio State roster. Ohio State actually must carry a little bit smaller roster because they only have 14 3-stars. So that's 69 guys on the team. 10 5-stars, however. So
Yeah.
that is an insane number. The 10 5-stars stands out to me a little bit more even. Like you knew Ohio State was going to rack up most of their rosters in today's era is going to have a ton of 4- or 5-star guys.
Right.
The thing that stands out to me, you've got 10 of the elite of the elite. A 5-star by definition on 3 is a guy who's projected to be a first-round pick. So think about that for a second. Obviously, they're not going to have 10 first-round picks, you wouldn't think. But if you think about throughout 3 or 4 classes, potentially, 10 5-stars is an insane number.
Well, and Chris, you guys know this well. Just because a guy gets a 5-star label doesn't mean he's going to be a superstar in college football. But when you bring in that high level, your opportunity to have most of those guys succeed pretty high.
Yeah, it is. And I think and it depends on the level. Like there's levels. When you think about 4 stars, for example, I don't know the exact number, but there are lots of 4 stars, and 5 stars, the way that On3 does it, they designate 32 players for 5 stars. And that number sounds familiar. It kind of is meant to mirror the first round of the NFL draft where there's, 32 players that are selected in the first round. And so, yes, there are going to be misses on 5 stars, just like other players. There are going to be guys that immediately flash with a huge impact like a Dylan Stewart, right? There's going to be guys that maybe come along a little bit more slowly, but their upside is just massive. And so the bottom line is if you could go and say, hey, would you rather carry a college football roster with 10 5-stars or 1 to 2? You're going to pick the 10, right? If you're just doing a blind on paper kind of test, because those are even more difference-making type of guys. The difference at times between, a high 3-star and a lower 4-star, not quite as much. At that point, it becomes a little bit more of a crapshoot. And so the 4- and 5-star number combined is impressive, but I'm with you, Wes. When you're getting that upper echelon, even accounting for some margin of error with, there's going to be some 5-star, misses, or maybe they're not quite as good as a 5-star ultimately during their career. Maybe some of your 4 and 3 stars play at a 5-star level. I get all that. But if you're getting that high of the blue chips of the blue chips, you're going to be really good. And look, coming into this year, Ohio State was the roster that people were pointing to around college football. There's a lot of great rosters around college football, but Ohio State was maybe the biggest one, or in the top 2 to 3, where people are going, that is the most talented roster in college football from top to bottom, factoring in what they brought back, what they've recruited from the high school ranks, and then impact transfers as well, like a Caleb Downs, like Will Howard at quarterback.
Yeah, and I would say they've had the perfect balance, honestly, in terms of what they've brought in and what they recruited in the first place. You add in a guy who is actually not a 5-star, but is, I would say, the upper echelon of a 4-star type, Quinshon Judkins as well. You add him to the mix in your backfield. But a lot of these guys that are starring for them, Jeremiah Smith, best receiver in the country, I think, were high school recruits. Emeka Ibuka, Travion Henderson, and then Jack Sawyer. So you do have a pretty good balance here if you're Ohio State in terms of using your resources to supplement. I mean, you added your quarterback, obviously a huge position for any team. You added a second sort of 1A, 1B situation at running back, and then you added arguably the best safety in the country in Caleb Downs. So great job of supplementing for them. All right, Notre Dame, not quite as elite in terms of 5 stars among this group. Notre Dame, 4 and 5 stars. 4 or 5 star, how many?
I'll probably guess right around 40, 42.
Yeah, I was going to say 41.
So, interestingly enough, Ohio State 55, 4 or 5 stars. Notre Dame 53, 4 or 5 stars. So
wow.
they have just as many, almost just as many, 4 or 5 stars. The only difference being all of theirs, according to On3 Industry rankings, all of theirs are 4 stars. So 53 4 stars, 0 5 stars. There are some On3 5 stars, which, again, it gets confusing. On 3 5 stars would be just the On 3 ranking itself. So, of course, you have like an On 3 ranking or Rivals ranking, a 24/7 ranking, ESPN ranking. Just the On 3 ranking, there's some 5 stars mixed in. I think 4 or 5 of them, if I remember correctly. I just had the number. But the On 3 industry ranking, there are 4 guys among that group that were 5 stars on 3 only. The industry ranking is that average, which in theory would give you a more accurate picture of where things are.
You know what that
just as many.
tells me?
Yeah, what's up?
A couple things there. Given that given that Notre Dame is playing in the title game, I think we could say we love Charles Power, right? And he is out in front on a lot of guys. I think we could say, hey, On 3 may have nailed some of their, and I don't even know who those 5 stars are, Wes, in terms of names with the 4 that they individually ranked as 5 stars, but maybe they were right, on them. The other thing is, we look at Ohio State's number of 10 5 stars on the industry ranking, which is the way to think of the industry ranking is like more of a consensus, right? If a guy's a consensus All-American, everybody agrees he's an All-American. When you have a guy or 10 guys in Ohio State's case that are consensus On 3 industry ranking 5 stars, the weighted average, that means there's more agreement. And that means, I think not that there's no chance of a miss, but it solidifies that like maybe a little bit more of a no-brainer type, in terms of what those guys are. So, but still, I mean, Notre Dame, to be close, they don't have the 5 stars in terms of the consensus guys, but overall, this is still a really deep roster that probably didn't even get enough love coming into the season for how talented they are.
Yeah, it's going to be a high level of athleticism and skill on the field on Monday night for sure that we'll break down a little bit more as the end of the week comes along as we preview the national championship game.
So that's, by the way, 100 4 or 5 stars will be on the field
to some degree on Monday night, and hopefully it'll be a good game. Again, we'll talk about more as the week goes along. Some rule changes being proposed across college football by the coaches. Good, bad, somewhere in the middle. We'll debate that coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, guys, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. of course, your premier spot if you have roofing issues or maybe you want a new roof. Hit up our friends. They're going to help you with that. 803-590-7870. Head on over to classicroofingsc.com. Taking good care of your roof, it can be challenging, but of course, you don't have to do it alone with the years of expertise under their hats. Classic Roofing is the go-to residential and commercial roofing company for home and business owners in and around the Midlands. Quality craftsmanship, customer service that simply is unmatched. Hit them up today. Again, classicroofingsc.com, 803-590-7870. They also have this great feature on the website where you can get a look at your exact home with all of your roofing options so that you can get an idea of what those shingles may look like before. Hit them up today, Classic Roofing.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on your Wednesday here on the game. Reminder, Friday, going to be broadcasting live all day long, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. The entire 107.5 The Game crew at Pro Swing, new location at 4708 Forest Drive out in Columbia. So come by and see us as we are hanging out there all day long. This week, concluded yesterday, the American Football Coaches Association convention going on right up the road from us in Charlotte. Many things being discussed for this offseason, including some potential rule changes in college football. One in particular that has a lot of people's interest revolves around the fake injury problem that's kind of run rampant across college football, especially this past season. Some teams like Ole Miss, obviously egregious offenders of that rule. Coaches got together, and this week there's just a proposal, still has to be officially approved by the NCAA's Rules Committee, but the proposal that they put forward that are going to attempt to get passed for the 2025 season is that any injured player would be sidelined for the rest of a drive unless a team used a timeout to reinstate the player. A head coach fine, possibly tethered to a post-game review process, was also discussed as well. Again, not an official rule, but something that's being proposed as a possible change. And I talked about this earlier with Jack. I get the principle of it, but unfortunately, we'll start with you, Chris. I see a lot of holes in this.
Well, I'll be curious to hear what holes you have. But, I mean, some version of this is needed. I think we all agree. For anyone who watched, and outcome notwithstanding from the South Carolina Ole Miss game, maybe Ole Miss fans loved it. Maybe they thought it was great that they were, going down every 2 or 3 plays, and they thought it was great gamesmanship. Me personally, I wouldn't, even if I'm a fan of that team watching it. I'd be sitting there going, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? This isn't part of the game. So we do have to find a way to fix it. And as with most things, there's not, I don't think, a perfect answer. The one thing I can think of, or one thing probably of many that just comes to mind right off the bat is, in this review process, if you go to plays within a football game, officials get calls wrong. That's pretty obvious. And even when they go to the monitor, they come back and you're like, what are they seeing that everybody else in the world is or isn't seeing? And one concern for me would be if there is some type of legitimate injury and they deem it to be quote unquote fake, how do you rectify that? Are we going to have, as we know, there's a lot of litigation out there right now. I mean, is a player going to have a valid injury, get dinged for a drive, his coach gets fined, and then you have to come back and you're able to provide some kind of medical proof? Like, I don't know if that's where you're going with the holes, Tyler, but that's one thing that comes to mind on this particular item.
What really stood out to me, and Hugh Freeze brought this up, you can read Ross Dellinger's write about this on Yahoo Sports. He says, it's all well and good until your quarterback gets hurt or something like that. And I imagine a scenario, because look, cramps happen, you get stingers, and you can, be out for a couple plays and come back in. Let's say you're in a 2-minute drill at the end of the game, you don't have any timeouts, your quarterback catches a cramp on a run and is out for a play or two, but is good to go. By the letter of this rule, if he's laying on the field and has to be taken off, he wouldn't be allowed to come back in. You don't have any timeouts that could bring him back in. That's an issue with me. Also, the fact that you're saying for the rest of the drive, well, if I'm on defense where a lot of these injuries, fake injuries do occur, if my opponent's driven down the field, they're facing a 3rd and goal, well, why wouldn't I fake an injury there? My guy's not going to be out for one play. It gives me the chance to reset and put whatever personnel I want on the field, especially if I'm going up against a tempo team that hasn't allowed me to sub. I see people still taking advantage of that on the back end of a drive because theoretically their player's only going to be out for a handful of more plays after that.
Yeah, and my argument to that, though, would be you are significantly decreasing the opportunities for the defense to be able to pull that.
You are, but it doesn't eliminate it completely.
Yeah, but would you rather something that's better or just staying with the awful situation we have now?
Some is better than none in terms of cleaning this up, and I don't know
what's your better answer then?
That's the thing, is I don't know what the complete answer to this is, but this rule change would not completely alleviate it, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I feel like rules are never going to completely fix everything. Can you take away 90% of the offenses here potentially? I don't know if anybody would ever go for this. They probably wouldn't. It almost feels like, to me, defenses should be dinged more than offenses. Offenses are not faking injuries.
There have been times. Well, I mean, was
The Ole Miss running back.
Yeah,
but
Parrish, Bentley, whichever one it was. Like, it does happen, not as frequently, but it does happen.
and I think that would have been a very clear violate. You know, when the quarterback points for the guy to go down on camera, then I don't care what anyone says. Like that would be a fine situation. I feel like that would you should find someone for that. I think. I don't know. There is no perfect answer, but I do think just making the penalty for a guy having to go down and exit steeper slows down a lot of these issues. Now, what happens when it's an end of game situation, final drive of the game? Does that? Could you? Are there caveats you could put in 2-minute situations? I don't know, because you already have some scenarios there to keep people from not using injuries to save timeouts.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
You already have that built into the rules. If you have no timeouts left and you have an injury and you're in a 2-minute situation, are you going to make a team's backup quarterback go finish the game? That doesn't seem valid to me. Anyone?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
the when you make it more complex, right? Like, not you, Wes, but just generally, if you say, okay, we're not going to make this such a you're injured, you're out for a drive. If you kind of put levels to it, or you attach certain circumstances, hey, if we see your quarterback point at your running back to go down, if we see the sideline signaling, which we've seen this, right?
Yeah.
If we see 2 or 3 coaches on your sideline signaling for a guy who's just walking around to go down, and he falls down like he's been shot, then it kicks in. Maybe other instances it doesn't. My concern with that is that if you're asking officials who already can't handle what we've given them in terms of the basics, hey, here's a false start. Oh, we didn't see it. If they can't handle those things, are they going to be able to administer this part of the game properly? Again, you make a good point, Wes. There are problems with all of it. I highly doubt we're going to come up with a perfect solution. We do have to fix this. A lot of teams don't do it. I can't remember South Carolina doing this ever. Ole Miss did it a lot. So you have probably a smaller number of offenders, but that smaller number is messing it up for everybody. So I'm not going to pretend to have a perfect solution. I do get the concerns that others have. But gosh, it does seem like you got to attach some conditions to it, based on the situation. I'm just worried about the officials being able to handle it.
Well, I thought Billy Napier in the article by Dellinger had the best response of, why don't we just stop doing it? And again, you're in the room with Lane Kiffin and these other guys that were egregious offenders. I don't know how much Florida may have done that this season. I mean, he's not wrong, but again, if you're having an area of the rule book that's gray that you're trying to exploit, you're going to do that until they shade it in to where you can't do it anymore. And it's just funny thinking you have the room full of criminals that are now attempting to make the new law.
Well, and this happens with coaches all the time. Like these other people are tampering. Well,
You're not?
Are you tampering? So I will say this, though, not to be a Kiffin defender. Teams have used this on Kiffin, against Kiffin, over and over and over again, too.
Which is why I think he did it so much, to show
100%.
how ridiculous it was.
Yes. He said, if they're going to do this to us, we're just going to take it to the 1,000th degree, basically.
Yeah, that's not the only rule change that's being proposed. Also, changes potentially come to the transfer portal as well. We'll hit that to wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Wednesday on the game. Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you on your Wednesday, talking proposed rule changes across college football. Dove into the coaches at the American Football Coaches Association convention and started this week proposing their idea for how to quell fake injuries. Also, in a unanimous decision, the coaches also proposed a 10-day singular portal window in early January to eliminate the spring window and condense the current December portal window down as well. And, guys, we've talked about the chaos of the college football calendar a lot, and I see pushback on even this proposal as well. There's no seemingly perfect way to do it, but it seems like the coaches are all in agreement that this is the way they prefer to do it.
Chris, I see why the coaches would prefer this.
Yeah.
Is this not another way to get sued again?
This is a perfect way to get sued. If you're looking for an idea, here you go. Yeah, I did have one thought that even for coaches, like think, Wes, about how chaotic we know. We just finished up covering, we're not out here actually trying to recruit guys. We're covering it. And it is pretty crazy. You know, the length of the window that we have right now is longer than what they want to go to. And it is jam-packed. You know, you got coaches out there and the support staff people, the director of player personnel, recruiting type guys like a Darren Usher. I mean, they are swamped in a time period like that. I start thinking about condensing all of that activity into 10 days. And, you know, head coaches may think it's a great idea because they don't have to do quite as much work on that. I bet all the DPPs out there are going, I don't know about this. But to your greater point about what this means for players, where my head goes is now you're limiting players. Now you're shrinking one of the windows down to 10 days, and then you're trying to eliminate
it completely on the other.
Yeah, and I mean that in a day and age where all the power or most of the power is going to the players and everything, you know, the courts are saying, this isn't just us making it up on the show. The courts are saying, now you can't do that. That limits players' citizens' opportunities to, you know, go make money for themselves. This seems like it is ripe for the picking. And in fact, Wes, a couple of folks on social media who, you know, are legal guys who are really involved in NIL, like Mitt Winter, like Darren Heitner, people who, you know, agents. A lot of these types of people are already setting the stage for, yeah, y'all can try that, but you're probably going to pay the price in the form of some new lawsuits.
Well, let's kind of present an example here because, look, everything boils down to antitrust and, you know, the latest, ruling with the, transfer rule being lifted on, you know, limiting guys that were undergrads that transferred because, hey, you're now limiting the earning potential by saying they can't play when they go to a new school. So theoretically, in this instance, by saying, okay, there's no more spring portal window anymore, now you're saying, okay, well, guys can't go through spring practice, assess their standing within their current team and decide, hey, I think I have a better opportunity elsewhere to find more playing time and align with NIL and all those kind of things. So that would, Chris, probably be the first thing people would bring up in terms of the legal aspect of this and how this could go sideways, right?
Yeah, I mean, just, again, limiting opportunities for players, that's why things are so open right now is, hey, you can't say a guy can't transfer, right? You can't say a guy has to sit out if he transfers. The relaxation of rules to where there are not many right now. And I go back to collective bargaining. Like, let's take it big picture. If we want to have a more professionalized structure in terms of allowing guys to transfer, NIL, we have got to be able to say, number one, when revenue sharing comes along, it's going to be pay to play. You have two sides. You have the players, and then you have college football. Let's just call it college football, not the NCAA. Maybe it's the college football playoff. Maybe it's the conferences. The two sides have to be able to agree to a structure to where they say, if you want to play college football, you have to agree to some parameters, right? When an NFL guy signs a contract, he's giving up some rights to be able to participate. Right now, we don't have that. We are doing everything through litigation and figuring out as we go and adjusting the rules as the court adjusts the rules for you. You know, it's kind of silly, right? The courts say, no, you can't do that. The NCAA comes along, they update their quote unquote policy, you know, and their rules. So I think if we want to truly limit the transfer portal windows, you're probably going to have to do it within the structure of a collective bargaining agreement. That way it's not going to be subject to courts because everybody's going to agree to it. But again, we don't have that structure yet in college sports.
Again, these are just rules proposals. We'll see if they do come to fruition with the NCAA Rules Committee eventually passing them a little bit down the road. And we'll talk about that as that continues. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself, Terry Ford, up next on your Wednesday here on The Game.
All right, guys, before I give up the mic, let me tell you about our friends at Firehouse Subs. Lunchtime is upon us. Hit up our friends at Firehouse by going to firehousesubs.com or by using the Firehouse Subs app. Hitting the Rapid Rescue to go, avoid the wait, order online. One of the best parts about it, other than the great food, is you're going to get points every single time you order. Then you can trade those points in for free food. If you want to try something new, try the new French dip on a garlic butter roll. It's got premium roast beef. It's got the au jus on the side, 2 types of cheese, caramelized onions. It is fantastic, just like all the other great options at Firehouse Subs. We know you got a favorite, but again, if you want to try something new, hit the French dip. My number one, still brisket, add bacon. Tyler says add the hot sauce from the Hot Sauce Bar, which is back with a ton of awesome options from mild to very, very hot. Whatever it is you want, they got something for you at Firehouse Subs.